so today I'm going to be doing just a really quick introduction because I want to show you some of my favorite products and how I set up to do some oil painting and basically everything that I use. So I'm going to get right to it. So I'm going to go over my setup here, and basically you'll be able to see in this shot my easel. It's really important to have a nice easel. This I can adjust for any height that I'm working at, any size. It was kind of an investment to purchase this easel, but I'm really happy I did. It's made my back thank me so much because whether I'm sitting or standing, I can make it so it's the right height, because you don't want to be reaching too high or crunching over or anything like that. So there's that, and then as you can see, I've got a few palettes on the go over there, a little just boxes underneath the table. It's a really ratty table, but I think it's important to not have to care that you are getting paint all over the place, and you can get messy, and that's fine. There's a little plastic drawer where I keep all my paints usually. I've got brushes, and I also have some bins down there that I can dispose of with my used rags. So here we'll be able to see all of the supplies that I use on a regular basis and what I recommend for people to start using when they are first starting out. So I'm going to start with some basics. Glass jars, I basically save them, and you want something that still has a lid. And the reason why you want to do that is because solvents can make gas come up, and the more you inhale, the worse it is for you. So if you can keep that covered, that is great. Basically, you use a solvent to clean your brushes or water down your paints. I like this Gamblin's Gamsol. It is pure odorless mineral spirits, and it's meant to be the standard for studio safety. Basically, if you are going to be using any kind of solvents to clean your brushes, that is a good thing to use there. I also recommend linseed oil. I try these days to just use the solvent to clean my brush, and if I'm thinning down my oil paints, I like to use a little bit of linseed oil. And I usually actually keep a little bit of linseed oil in a smaller jar. Before I start painting, I put on a little bit of this barrier cream, and you can find different kinds of barrier cream. Let me see if I can open this, but basically the barrier cream is just this white cream that you put on your hands to form a little barrier between your skin and the oil paint. And I'm a messy painter, so I use this all the time. Must have is rags, and I used to rip up old sheets and t-shirts and use those, but I basically go through them so much that I've started to purchase rolls. So these are like shop towels that I just get at Home Depot, and then these are white rags as well that is just in a box, and I use those to wipe off my brushes in between cleaning them if I'm using certain colors to mix. And you know, I basically just put them in a little bit of solvent and then wipe them off on a rag, and that's how I clean my brushes in between. I also recommend a palette, and this is a white plexiglass palette, which is actually my favorite palette out of all the palettes that I own. It's because it's white so you can see the color, and also you can scrape off any color or leftover paint relatively easy. I'm gonna wheel over to my glass palettes over here, and as you can see, they are really encrusted with paint. They are a lot harder to clean. I have cleaned them before, but it's a lot of work. And brushes. So I'm going to be talking about a couple different kinds of brushes that I recommend using. There's basically different kinds of brushes based on their shape. This one is a round, and as you can see, it's got more of a pointed tip. And then this one's a filbert, and as you can see, the edges are a little more rounded, whereas this one's a flat, and it's a bit longer, and it's got longer bristles, and it's flat on top. Whereas something that is short and spiky like that is bright. So those are the different kinds of paint brushes that I recommend. It depends what you're painting, but I basically like to have a variety of sizes. If I'm maybe covering a larger area of paint, I recommend using bigger paintbrushes, whereas if you're painting maybe something like a portrait that has a lot of fine details, you're going to want these nice little tiny brushes. So it's important to have different sizes. The two different brands I have are Simply Simmons and Princeton Art and Brush Co. And I like these because you can use them with acrylic or you can use them with oil paints. And I just like to have, there's different kinds of bristles on different brushes. Like these are more natural bristles, whereas acrylic tends to have more of a synthetic brush, like almost like this is more synthetic. You can't really tell unless you're touching them, but I don't like to have a really heavy, stiff brush. I like something that I can blend out, but you just got to try different brushes and see what your favorite is. And palette knives. I recommend having a wide variety of palette knives. You can use these to paint with, so you can mix your paints. As you can see, there's some nice leftover paint on this palette knife. But you can mix your paints, you can scrape up, you can actually paint with them or apply or use it as a tool. Also, I use this often to actually clean off my palette, as you can see. So I can do that. I recommend not using plastic palette knives with oil paints. I just find that oil paints are a little bit harder on your tools, so plastics tend to almost get worn down quite quickly. Same thing with jars. I recommend using a glass jar over a plastic jar. And I'm going to talk about the colors that I recommend students to buy when they're first starting out. I chose to use the brand Stevenson, which is a student's grade oil paint company, and I like them. I find that they still have good quality. They're pretty good for money. Paints can be expensive. I don't recommend getting super cheap paint just if you're wanting your paintings to maybe sell well. I find that quality can be really important. Basically, it's how much pigment they put in the paint to how much linseed oil. So usually it's pricier with the more rare pigments or a higher concentration of pigment. But anyway, here's some of the colors that I recommend. So as you can see, I've got some reds, some blues, and some yellows, and I've got two of each. This one's alizarin crimson, and this one's a cadmium red middle. And basically the difference between these two is that one's more of a cool red and one's more of a warm red. Same thing with our blues. I've got an ultramarine blue and a phthalo blue. This one's more of a warm blue, this one's more of a cool blue. And then here again we've got two different yellows, a cadmium yellow middle and an azo yellow lemon. So a cool yellow and a warm yellow. And I'm not going to super go into tons of color theory right now, but these are the basis of pretty much most colors that you can mix here. And then I've got white, obviously, and I actually use white and I use black as well. This isn't actually an opus color, and I'm not opposed to using white and black when I'm painting. You know, you can choose not to mix white with your paints if you don't want to, and you don't have to mix with blacks either. I tend to not want to use flat white or flat black unless it's very for a conscious decision. Sometimes to lighten colors you can use something like a Naples yellow. Also to darken colors you can choose things like burnt or raw umbers or a Payne's gray. So as you can see in the middle here, I've got some neutral colors. These are usually a lot cheaper because they're cheaper to make. So we've got Naples yellow, yellow ochre, raw sienna, burnt umber, and Payne's gray. And those are basically colors, especially when you're painting landscape, those are great colors to have. And this would be here a great starting color setup that you can mix most colors with. Now over here, I actually still have some other colors that I would recommend painting with. And I have some greens and an orange, for example. I also have a purple and a cerulean blue. And the reason why I have these is sometimes they save time, basically. You can mix greens very easily. To make a sap green, I might mix, maybe cadmium yellow with a little bit of ultramarine blue and maybe some burnt umber and see what kind of color, if I could get close to that. And with the phthalo green, I'd probably mix phthalo blue with Hansa lemon yellow or an Azo lemon yellow and see if we could get close to that color. Same thing with the cadmium red. I'd choose to use cadmium orange. I mean, I'd mix cadmium red and cadmium yellow and maybe get a closer orange. But sometimes I find that these are just a little bit more vibrant and they have a lot of pack, and if I'm just trying to save time. I have found it quite challenging to get a purple that I'm really happy with sometimes. So sometimes I like to get this one's a dioxazine violet. I don't know how to pronounce that. And then the cerulean blue as well. Over here you'll see a couple Gamblin colors. Gamblin, and they are well loved. I love Gamblin oil colors. They're my absolute favorite. If I had enough money, I would buy all Gamblin paints if I had a choice, but I don't always, and I choose to be selective with the colors that I buy from Gamblin. So you'll see often that I'll use these transparent earth yellows or earth oranges for glazes, just for some really rich hues. This turquoise color, or it's actually cobalt teal, is often the blues of my skies. This green gold is another rich, beautiful color. And these colors just, Gamblin uses a higher amount of pigment in their paints, and they're maybe more pure when they come out, and they look really beautiful, really rich, really lovely. So you can tell the difference, but you know, I'm a realist, and if I would say, like, I buy the small tubes in the Gamblin right now, I buy smaller tubes, I make it go as long as I can, and I use a lot of them. And I basically just recommend to buy your staples, like these colors over here at a cheaper price, and then invest. Look at these colors in it as investments. And then over here we've got some different kinds of alkyds. And the reason why there's a G in front of this is just because it's Gamblin. Now, what is alkyd? It sounds scary. It sounds like, what is that? If you're not an oil painter and you're looking at these chemicals that you're mixing with them, it sounds really scary. But basically what it does is it helps to change the consistency of your paint, and it adds a little bit of shine, and it makes it dry faster. And these basically changed my life once I started using them. So this one's more in the liquid form. It also comes light, which is a bit thinner. It's kind of syrupy to mix with your paints. It's really great for glazing. There's also, I have here a walnut oil, and that as well has a little bit of an alkyd in it, and it's really, as you can see, I've used all of it. I love it. It's really good for thinning your oil paints as well. And I like it for sketching in the beginning, just to put a little bit of oil paint with a little bit of the walnut oil, and it makes it really nice and thin, and it's great to sketch. I also use the Gamblin Galkyd gels. There's a solvent-free gel here and a Galkyd gel here as well. And so Alkyd gel is a bit cheaper. I squeezed a tiny bit out over here just so you can see the difference. It does tend to be a little bit, have more of a yellowing property. This is looking, the other gel is actually a lot more transparent from Gamblin, so that's why it's my favorite one. I also really enjoy as well the cold wax mediums from Gamblin. So this is beeswax that is mixed with a solvent, and it smells like beeswax. And it almost, as you can see, again, very well loved. And it almost looks like Crisco, if I had to describe it. So here's a tiny bit of that cold wax, and I'm just going to put it out on my thing here so you can see the different texture. This is much different to that as well. So you can see the different textures and how you can play with that, and when you mix it with your pigments, it looks really beautiful. The next thing to talk about would be canvases. So I often these days buy my canvases. So as you can see here, I got a gallery wrapped heavy duty canvas. I like it because it is still a nice thickness. So if you did end up doing a really nice painting and wanted to exhibit it, it's still gonna look really nice sticking out from the wall. This one that is on my easel right now is actually from Opus, and it's painted on, obviously. I used to construct my own canvases, so you can see here, this is a really large one that I have. It's stacked behind here waiting for a use one day. Probably I'll do some giant icebergs on them, I think, or a giant portrait or something. But I would hand stretch these and then prime them. And I used to make all of my own canvases, but I don't always have an access to a wood shop. It does save money in the long run. It is just a lot more work. The last thing I recommend is an apron. So something that's messy, that doesn't matter what you're wearing. Be mindful of what you're wearing when you are in the studio in case you do get messy. As you can see, sometimes I actually wipe paint on my aprons and it's still usable. I still wear it all the time. I've got a few that are in this condition. So it's not something conscious that I did. It just was handy and near and I wiped paint on myself. So that is why I use them. And as you can see, proud supporter of Opus. I love that store. I love them. That is the end of my little, basically a more in-depth tour of my studio setup and the products that I use and what I use every day when I'm in the studio and oil painting. In the future, I'm going to be doing other videos about solvent-free oil painting, how to clean your paintbrush, color theory, maybe a more in-depth video on oil painting mediums. Please comment and let me know what you want me to talk about. I'm going to be doing a tutorial coming up really soon about painting a landscape and clouds, because that was one that was requested, and as well as dealing with some negativity or rejection in the art world and how to kind of get past that as an artist or how to cope with that. So please subscribe to my channel. You can do that in the little box below. I also have a website, www.alexandraedmonds.com, that I will also put in the link below. So again, thanks for watching, guys.